I'm going to start that again. Robbie LeBlanc here for the awesome interview. And my guest today is MoPleasur. MoPleasur is an American composer, singer, producer, multi-instrumentalist. He plays piano, bass, trumpet, guitar, and I'm sure about a dozen other instruments. He plays everything from bebop to blues, Bach to R&B, holds a bachelor's degree in music from University of Connecticut, which is our hometown. He's also played with some of the greatest musicians in the world, including Earth, Wind & Fire, Christina Aguilera, Mary J. Blige, Chaka Khan, Najee, Marianne Meadows, George Duke, Roberta Flack, Natalie Cole, Michael Jackson, Bette Midler, and David Foster, to name a few. And so please welcome my grammar school friend and mantra musician, MoPleasur. And the crowd goes wild. Boom, boom, boom. Awesome. All right, cool. So how you doing, brother?
Man, I'm great. It's good to finally reunite with you, brothers. How long has it been? Oh my God.
It's been a long time. The last time I saw you is when you were with Earth, Wind & Fire at Caesar's Palace.
Whoa, okay. We used to almost live at that place. We were there all the time. Yes. Yeah.
And I actually remember I was watching, there was a PBS special that said Earth, Wind & Fire is playing over at Caesar's Palace. I said, well, let me go see if I can get in. And so I had to go over there. Before show and after show, I had to give the guy a message, and I said, listen, I really know him. They're like, yeah, everybody knows him. And so they finally did, and we went backstage and saw you.
I remember seeing you, man. That's been a long time ago.
Yeah, a long time ago.
So it's had to be before that.
Yeah. So let me ask you, in the midst of this coronavirus, what is happening with you and the people in London?
Well, you know, as far as the people in London, you know, it's obviously we haven't seen the worst of it yet here. And, you know, we're in lockdown. I've been in lockdown. I haven't been able to leave my house for maybe 3, maybe more weeks at this point, you know, so.
So will they let you leave the house to go shopping for groceries, or is that limited?
Yeah, I can go shopping, and thank God I could actually walk there within, there's 2 places I can walk within 10 minutes. And other than that, and going out to do exercise, that's it. We have to stay in our houses, you know. So, and I'm lucky because I live a little bit outside of London, so I'm not in the thick of all the, you know, apartments, flats, and all that kind of stuff, and subways and all that kind of stuff. So it's not so bad for me out here. I'm a little bit kind of in the burbs, a little bit north. St. Albans is the area.
And so what are, because I know you've been doing concerts also on Facebook Live and things like that. Now, are you coordinating that with some of your other musician friends there in town, or how are you doing all those?
Yeah, there's a lot of that. Actually, my girlfriend is an incredible singer. Her name's Kedma. So, you know, we're here together anyway, so it's kind of cool. Right? We just do a duo thing, and that's been really successful. We've done about 4 or 5 shows that way. But we have some things coming up. We have like special guests, and, you know, we got a string section that's going to play with. I don't want to spoil our little surprise, or, you know, you and I may do something. You know, so it's been cool that way. I'm getting a lot of calls to do compilation videos and things like live, you know, from separate houses type things, you know.
Yeah, cool. You know what? I just started using Zoom, and I wonder, we won't do this today, but I wonder whether we could actually jam at the same time on Zoom. I wonder whether there's a delay, or if it's so direct that I was just thinking about that.
I have some friends that have done it. Like, I have a friend who's very, guy named Mark DeLisser, who does, he's very well known here. He's like got his own TV shows and done the royal weddings and stuff. As far as vocal stuff, and has his own choir. It's actually, my girlfriend is in his choir, his main choir. And unfortunately, there is a delay when he went to do that kind of stuff. So I don't think he'll have it down yet.
Might be ugly. It's a little nasty.
It will be fun. You know?
So growing up, you because my dad and your dad, I told my dad I was going to be talking to you. He said, oh yeah, my dad loved playing golf and bridge. Your dad was a big bridge player, and so my dad sends you a hug.
Right back, brother.
But tell me about growing up for you. Like you started taking piano lessons with Carol Wright. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, actually, by the time I got into Carol, I was 7. That's when we moved to Guilford.
Okay.
We came from New Haven. My dad was actually school principal Hill House in New Haven, one of the high schools.
Oh yeah,
So,
I know Hill House. Yeah.
yeah, so we're talking about moving to Guilford in 1969, which I would say is 90+% white town, and
Yep.
there's black school principal from New Orleans, and Guilford was very welcoming back in 1969. So that shows how progressive, and
Yeah,
what a wonderful,
sure.
to grow up in. So by that time, I'd already been taking lessons for 3 years. At 7
Okay.
years old, I started when I was 4. A guy named Richard Pettaway, who was our church organist at Dixwell Church in New Haven.
Okay.
Yeah, they were given free lessons at the church. So a lot of the music teachers from Hill House and Cross and all the high schools and stuff devoted their time to like teaching up and coming kids at our church.
Sure.
So I'd taken violin lessons, I had trumpet lessons, and all that before I'd even really gotten to Guilford. So by the time I got to Carroll Wright, I was 7. I'd already been playing for 3 years.
That's funny. That's funny. But I also know you were part of the jazz band with Edmund Tarantino too, correct?
Yeah, Mr. T was just incredible. I owe a lot of my musical knowledge to Mr. T, and I'm sure you had him as well.
Yeah, he was kind of like our Mr. Holland's opus.
Yes,
Yeah.
perfect.
Because he was a guy that always wanted to be a jazz player, and then he started teaching track, and then he started doing driver's ed, just like that, because till the day he died, I remember saying, yeah, I just want to play. I just want to play, man. And
yeah, the thing about it was that's when we first got our, like, you'd say cats, and like that jazz lingo and stuff. He'd be talking about getting the bread and stuff. He was actually, out there working and stuff. He just was a cool guy. Mimi and I are still friends. She was a teacher under her dad at top school.
Yeah,
so.
I'm still in contact with Chris. Yeah, his son.
Yeah,
his son.
Yeah, Laura.
So here's a story that I heard. I was never quite sure what the whole, because I never heard it from you, but I heard that Ray Charles, he came to the Guilford School. I don't know if this is accurate yet. So I heard because you were a few grades before me, so I graduated before you. That Ray Charles came to the school, and then I heard that you asked him a question. Hey, Mr. Charles, how can somebody go about playing with you? And somebody said, hey, does he play? And apparently the kids all went, yeah, he's a great player. And then he says, you go to college? He goes, the minute you graduate college, you give me a call. And I heard within 3 days of you graduating, you called him and you were on the road 2 weeks later. Is that accurate?
Well, I hate to tell you, but not quite.
Well, that's the story I heard, and that's the story I've spread for years.
There's some pieces of truth to it. So first of all, it was at UConn. I was
UConn. Okay.
UConn. And I went to, Jorgensen up there. They had the homecoming concert, which was Ray Charles and David Letterman. So after the concert, I went backstage to go kind of just, see if I get autograph, this kind of thing. And the musical director, whose name was Clifford Solomon, music director for Ray Charles, sax player.
Okay.
He's a great guy. Was looking for a beer, so I was like, "Hey, well, we can go up to Ted's." I don't remember Ted's. It was like, our little hangout spot. So I took him up there for a beer, and while I took him for a beer, I asked him, how do you get on something like this? And he told me, he's like, well, send the tape to this address. What do you play? I said, well, I play bass, keyboards, but with Bass Boogie's about to leave, this kind of thing. So I sent a tape in. I went into Tribe Nossel, which I'm sure in New Haven, Richard Robinson, and did first time I've been in the studio, and I did a demo, and, had George on and stuff. And I was playing like a lot of bass leads and stuff, as well as bass bottom.
Sure.
And sent out there, and they called me when I was at my my dorm room at UConn in 1983, 84. And it was Ray Charles got on the phone and said, he asked, actually, it's a long story that actually goes a couple of years, but the initial story is that he asked me if I wanted to be in his band. He liked the tape. And I was scared, and I said no, because my dad was my mother's a teacher, and how am I going to tell them I'm like getting ready to quit school? There's just no way I could fathom it.
That's
But I
so
ended up calling them back and going out there and having an audition and such. And it was down to two guys, me and another guy for the bass spot, after about 4 days. And I had to tell, there was one day that it was just me and Ray locking up at the studio.
okay.
He's flipping the switches, asking me, is that light out, this kind of thing, and then he showed me a studio and all that. And then I had a one-on-one with him. And I said, well, Mr. C, I need to get back to school. And he said he didn't realize I was in school.
Okay.
Next thing I knew it, I had a flight back to school. So, and then it continues on because I actually ended up getting the gig, a couple of years later and stuff when the bass spot came back.
From what it looks like you got the gig the year you graduated from UConn.
It was exactly that. Exactly. It was like
that works. Okay, cool.
Later, right after I graduated. Yep.
So how long did you play with Ray Charles?
I did a full year.
And then what were the one or two biggest things you learned from work habit, from a musician habit? What did you walk away with and say, okay, boom, here's some lessons learned?
Oh, so many things. I mean, first of all, just musically, he's to me is my biggest keyboard influence. The blues and the way he plays and his style. Because I got a seat from him 3 feet away every night. As a bass player. I also learned about the road. It was my first road gig, and here I am. I toured the whole world, went to Brazil, Japan. We were everywhere, all over the States, 3-4 times, Canada, you name it, Mexico. And so just to travel. And then I was the youngest guy in the band. So I had all these people around me that were seasoned, cats, and kittens showing me the ropes. So, and then also musically, I really learned how to follow, so because he led the whole band with his feet and his body movements.
Oh, so, interesting.
Yeah. That was amazing.
Expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, so we were, we used to say, watch the foot, because if you know how Ray moves, you're watching the downbeats and such are in his feet. So a lot of the time, we as a rhythm section would be watching his feet, whether he'd slow down, speed up, this kind of thing. And then the full big band and everybody else would follow us.
Okay.
And then he had some hand signals and such. He knew how to, if the band was too loud, he'd put his hand up in the air. And it would be this kind of thing, and then you hear 28 people just immediately subito, just get half as loud as they were. And then by the time we got to read him after knowing all this stuff, by the time he put his hand up in the air, Dan already was on it coming down. He was a tough boss.
Yeah, was he hard to work for? Was he demanding? Was he understanding? I mean, certain guys are just brutal. Other people. So, what was your view and perspective of that?
It's a very well known fact that Ray was very, very tough to work with. There's just no two ways about it. But at the same time, I'm very thankful for that, because after that, I was able to work with anybody. He'd stop the band and call you out, this kind of thing, or yell at you. Interestingly enough, when he died, one of the things that he did leave saying as one of his regrets was that he regretted having, kind of dealt with musicians in that kind of way. But at the same time, I was glad to have it, because I had a strict upbringing anyway with my parents being both being teachers. So I was kind of used to that anyway. And I think that Ray really, that being my first gig, it really whipped me into shape for the rest of my career.
Awesome. So was that band early on, were they, because you were the young new kid, did they give you a hard time? Did they play with you, or unplug your amp right before your solo or anything like that?
No, it was never like that. But they were actually very, they all became like my brothers and sisters, and they would help. They were actually teaching me all the time. They were great. But when you're a newbie, as we said, I was young blood. So first on the tour, on the bus, because we would ride on like a Greyhound bus, full big band, instruments, everything, and 5 Raylettes. So about 33, 35 of us with road manager and all that. You start out doubling up in a seat, so 2 of us would be, the 2 newest guys would be stuck side by side, sleeping on each other's, heads falling together and stuff like that. And then when someone else joined the band, then you got your, what we call a condominium, because you get your own seat,
Oh, that's funny. That's fun. So so after that tour, you obviously had a bunch of options. What was the next option that you decided to go with? That
You
you're
know,
going to pull?
interestingly enough, I didn't do another tour with Ray. I was asked to, but I said no. I don't know how I knew this, but I thought that I was going to slide into kind of a bass career in LA because I'd always wanted to, you know, me and my boy Mike Frost, he probably
Yeah.
know Mike, you know, we were always listening to sides and albums and stuff and, you know, knowing everybody that played in everything and stuff. And it's like my dream to go out there and be like a Greg Gaines or, you know, Nathan East or one of those kind of guys. So I thought I was going to do kind of be a West Coast guy, but what ended up happening is our good friend Jeff Pivar, who I incredible guitarist that we toured together with Ray,
Right.
had a gig in the Village in New York City. So this is like '87,
Right.
and it turned out that he needed a keyboardist for this gig. And back then it was like they had the cabaret laws. I don't remember that because it was like you couldn't have more than 3 people.
Ah, okay.
You know, they paid extra money for the license. And
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
they were ripping people off. But we used to play this club called Preachers down there on Bleecker Street, right
Okay.
on Water and Bleecker. Me and Jeff Pivar and the drummer, or it'd be me, him, and a bass player, and a drum machine, or whatever, this kind of thing. So Jeff and I would play the Village, and then so many people were coming through there, then they'd start seeing me play keyboards. And actually, the funny part was Jeff only knew I played keyboards from a couple of times I sat on Ray's keyboard and played, and he was like, "Yeah, you play, don't you? You know, well, you know."
Nice.
So I actually owe Jeff a big one for that. And then from there, I started getting hired for gigs out of New York as a keyboardist.
Okay. All right. Nice. You know, growing up, we obviously grew up listening to Stevie Wonder, Average White Band, Earth, Wind and Fire, Michael Jackson, and all that. And so, I mean, who doesn't like Earth, Wind and Fire? So when you got the gig with Earth, Wind and Fire, that first night that you were on stage, was that surreal?
Oh, it was more than surreal, Robbie, you know, because they were my favorite band. They were my favorite band and the first concert I ever went to, New Haven Coliseum.
Oh, I was there. That was when they had the big stage show. Oh my God, that was a great concert.
Well, that was my defining moment, Robbie. I mean, like, I wouldn't have, you know, my parents, you know, my dad, very much, you know, classical orchestra conductor. They kind of had that vision for me, concert pianist. And so the whole idea of me going to a show like that was kind of like, well, oddly enough, we had someone staying with us that my mother brought in from New Haven. She was a teacher there, and she had a kid that needed a place to stay, and her name was Ramona. Ramona came and lived with us for years, and she took me to that concert.
Okay.
She, you know, asked my mom's permission and all this kind of stuff. So it was just mind blowing. As soon as I saw that, I was like, okay, I know exactly what I want to do, and I know I want to play the bass because I haven't played the bass yet. So
how did you get hooked up? Did you connect with Reen, or how did that happen? The introduction to play with them. How did that actually happen?
You know how it happened, Robbie? Off through George Duke.
Really?
The great George Duke.
Yeah.
After playing on the East Coast, I played with a guy named Najee.
Yeah.
One of my big gigs there.
Sure.
And they started to do, on the West Coast, they started to do what were called jazz explosion gigs. So they had one band and 3 or 4 different artists. So the concept still goes on now because, you know, they could save money instead of having, you know, Diane Reeves and George Duke and, you know, some other artists at the same, Angel Bofield, whoever it is. And they each have their own band. They can make one band out of players from each of the others' bands. So this one was Najee, George Duke, Diane Reeves. So Najee took me and Ron Lawrence, who you probably know.
Yeah, Ronnie, yeah.
Ronnie Lawrence. And then we had Billy Kilson on drums and who was Diane Reeves' drummer.
Okay.
And then we had, like Larry Campbell, Ray Fuller, and those were, and, you know, Everett Harp and all, because those were all George's guys.
Nice.
And we're all part of one band. So then now I'm on the West Coast playing with George Duke. George liked my playing and stuff, and George was the one that actually recommended me when Earth, Wind and Fire reformed. They were looking for a keyboardist, and he told Philip, you know, check out this guy Mo.
Nice. Nice. And so Did he call you? Who called you from them? How what was the process there?
Philip did, like so when George hooked me up with Philip was actually doing a solo album. He was looking for people to write with,
Okay.
and George had recommended me, and another guy, Carl Caldwell, who I've been playing with George, recommended me. He was one of Philip's best friends, so Phil came to my house, and
Okay.
I was nervous as heck. I couldn't. I had their posters on my wall, I'm telling you, I could hardly speak when this guy's there, and it just was the perfect timing that they decided to reform again, right? Like right at the time I had met Philip, and Philip told Maurice White, there's one guy that that I was checking out that George Duke turned me on to that might be
Nice.
cool. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Do you remember where that first concert was with them that you played with them?
Absolutely. The first one was the first actual show we did was actually a television show, and that was Arsenio Hall show.
Ah, awesome.
1993. It was
Nice.
kind of like the Earth, Wind, and Fire. Yeah. The
Oh.
first live audience show was in Japan, and that's actually you can find that on YouTube. That was 1994 in Tokyo.
All right, cool. I know you were doing some playing with George Duke. Did you ever play with Larry Carlton, guitarist Larry Carlton?
God, I never got to play with Larry. Even
The
though
guys you're playing with they all played together, so I figure maybe at one point you would have connected with him.
no, not him, but Terry Trotter, who was his keyboardist,
Yeah,
and also a big influence on me, ended up being kind of like a second dad to me because we played together with Natalie Cole for years.
okay, cool.
No, never Larry. I knew Larry a little bit. I met him in Brazil, actually, right before. Do you remember what happened to him and his?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I met him in Brazil in '86 with Ray Charles, and
Okay.
I never had the pleasure of playing with him.
All right. So right now, let me see. Before a concert, do you have a routine? Like the day of a concert, do you have certain warm-up things that you do? Or do you have a routine or a practice routine on days of concert or when you're on tour?
Yeah, it kind of depends on what it is. Every gig is different. So, some things require more than the others and this and that. And a lot of times I'm the music director, so preparation might be a lot more than just, the playing part of it. Sometimes I have to even as now I'm Bette Midler's music director, and that might change a key, for an 18-piece band, or she might change songs or this kind of thing. Earth, Wind, and Fire, I was a musical director, so there was a lot that went with that. And that includes lighting, choreography, and all the whole show concept, video, and making sure all those things are in sync.
And as music director, were you also responsible for writing out every chart for every member?
Well, it depends on every situation had a different thing. Yeah, sometimes it was like that, and I'm telling you, I love to delegate, so I would, any chance I could, I would find someone else to actually do the writing. I mean, I might tell them every note that was there. With Earth, Wind, and Fire, we had we'll do it for everybody in the band except pretty much the horns. I might even tell the horns what I wanted them to play, but their guy Ray Brown had a special way of doing it. So it was, the thing about musical directing, and I'm sure you know this, is, sometimes you're dealing with different personalities and you're kind of speaking different languages to all of them, but somehow it all comes together. So I kind of mastered the art of doing what was, the path of least resistance and getting
Awesome.
most.
You mentioned Ray Brown. Did you mean the bass player Ray Brown? Or
no, trumpet player.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah,
it's funny. When I was at GIT in 1981, it was the first day of improv class. Ray Brown, Howard Roberts, and Tommy Tedesco are standing in the back of the room. They got their arms like this, and they said, "Okay, who's next?" And I'm kind of looking around and say, "You." I mean, I never improvised a note in my life. I get up there, and I totally bombed. It was ugly. It was like the ugliest thing. I walk off stage, and Ray Brown comes up to me. He said, "First line?" And I said, "Yeah." He says, "The key to improv is if you hit a bad note, growl at the keyboard or bass player, make it sound like they played the wrong changes."
That's true. Oh, that's
You
good.
know, so
Did you study with Tommy? Did you get to study with Tommy Tedesco at all?
oh yeah, no, he was. That's
Right.
why I asked you. He got me my first gig in Hollywood.
Wow.
Yeah, actually kind of a crazy gig. Um, he knew I was probably the only classical guitar player at GIT at that time because I went. It was like the second year
Yeah.
that it was there. Uh, but I remember Tommy telling the story of Larry Carlton's first studio gig, and he apparently Larry had like 88 bars of a pause, and then he had a big giant E chord on the next measure, and Tommy went over and unplugged his amp
Oh, no, he
right
didn't.
before, and they went, "What happened to the guitar?" And then Larry's like looking nuts and crazy, and Tommy said, "Oh, I unplugged the wrong amp. I'm sorry." And afterward, yeah. And then afterwards, he walked up to Larry. He says, "Welcome to the club, man." You know,
Nice,
so
nice, nice.
yeah.
Well,
So
that's where it turned out. You know, Tommy was one of Ray's favorite guitar players. Ray
for
Charles.
real. Well, he's played on more TV and more albums than any other guitarist alive. I mean, he's played on. He was Hill Street Blues, Cavatina. I mean, he just
Yeah,
he
yeah.
had a famous saying. He say, "There's no money above the fifth fret."
Ah, he's right.
Yeah.
Right.
Um, the
Or used to be
huh?
right. Used to be right.
Yeah, exactly. You should be right. Back in the day.
Yeah.
Um, so you also did some playing with Michael Jackson. Uh,
Yes.
yeah, tell me a little bit about your experience with Michael and how did that come about?
Yeah, Michael, it was kind of crazy. So there was a This Is It band. It was his last band. You know,
Yep.
I played his memorial, which was kind of crazy too. But yeah, so I was
Jennifer Batten was playing at that time with him, right?
no. We had Ori
Oh,
Anthony.
okay.
Yeah, you know
Okay.
Ori, and Michael Bearden, who was the keyboardist, music director. Michael had been a friend of mine since the '80s. Like we actually watched each other, kind of, I'm playing with Najee, he's playing with Tom Brown, Angie both, that kind of thing. So we were getting the same calls, and sometimes we would work together. If I played bass, we do, Rochelle Farrell and a couple other gigs. And so we were always friends, So he got the Michael Jackson gig, and I was in Atlanta at that time. Michael's gig was out of LA, and my wife, my ex-wife Lori was like, honey, you should. We had a mutual friend that was on the gig, Mike McKnight. She was like, you should tell Mike McKnight, if you're interested in doing this Michael Jackson gig. And I'm like, nah, I don't do that. I've never been a guy to like solicit myself. I've never
Right.
done it. Sometimes I wish I had, but I'm kind of like, if it's meant for me, it'll show up. And then sure enough, Mike, I was talking to my friend Mike McKnight, and I didn't mention the Michael Jackson gig at all. But we were talking about something completely different. And he called me back and said, "Oh, by the way, you should tell Michael Bearden that you're interested in Michael Jackson gig." I said, "Okay," So I wrote to Michael Bearden, and he said, "Oh, we already got somebody." Dave DeLone, who was an incredible keyboardist.
Yeah.
And so he said, but stick around. Anything changes, I'll let you know. And sure enough, Dave DeLone was working with American Idol and couldn't get off his contract. And 3 weeks later, Michael called me, Beard, and said, "Okay, well, I need you to come out here and kill it, this and that." I said, "I'm on the next plane, And I
Nice.
actually had to pretend that I was from LA, because the way LA works, you may know this, they're not really trying to hire out of town people.
Right.
I got hotel and flights and all kind of stuff. So I got my own flight, I got my own hotel, and by the end of the first week, then they were paying for my hotel. So
Cool. Nice.
yeah, but that was obviously a huge disappointment, and a time period I'll never forget, to go through and his death, and what happened after and all that. It was crazy.
What were one or two lessons you learned working with Michael?
Oh, wow. Well, you're talking about pretty much the top of the height of professionalism, like that whole thing of like, every night's got to be, spot on, boom, energy, this and that. Matter of fact, the movie This Is It, which I'm, blessed to be part of. You can see that we're like, we're playing. we're not playing as if we're playing for, 50,000 people, but we are, every time we do a take, it's got to come with that energy. It's got to come with that precision, and this and that. So, that was one thing about the Michael Jackson gig. He was very giving. He wanted us to, give all of our talents if we could. So I ended up bringing the trumpet into the gig a little bit, just playing a little bit of trumpet as well as keyboards. And I actually played a little guitar on Black and White, just playing a
Ah,
little,
nice,
yeah. So that was cool.
nice.
Yeah.
Um, so what are some things I know you're working on some projects right now.
Yeah.
Uh, what are uh, some stories that people probably don't know about you that you'd like to share?
Oh God, those are the ones that I want that I will share.
Yeah, I was.
Well, the thing is, I've been in London the last 5 years.
And
You
what
know,
brought you to London, by the way? How did you end up in London?
I had done some work for a friend on her CD, and I'd done it through the internet. And then I had another friend that was doing a show at Ronnie Scott's here
Yeah.
5 years ago, and he was like, I knew I was coming over there, so I reached out to my other friend, her name is Alana, and I told her, "Hey, I'm coming to London," and she said, "Really? If you come, stay an extra week because I can get you some master classes and um, gigs and whatever else it was." So sessions, and so I said okay, and I was able to stay with my friend. I stayed an extra week, and I was so busy because people knew who I was. I had no idea anybody knew who I was over here. And I show up, and people are like, "Oh wow, MoPleasur. Can you play on this?" And blah blah blah. And can I get a piano lesson from you? And all this kind of thing. So I ended up staying for a whole month.
Okay.
And then I was kind of like, yeah, let me try my hand over here in London. So I've been steady, working, doing all those things I've said and more. I do a lot of, I work with a lot of young artists, and which has been great. I do a lot of writing, songwriting,
Okay.
um, and a lot of production, master classes at, the top schools here, including, Paul McCartney School up in Liverpool. And I just did perform Rhapsody in Blue up in Manchester at
Nice.
the
Nice.
Royal College. And so it's a hodgepodge of a lot of things. And then I'll end up playing like, $50 gig down at some little spot, downtown. I've got my own bands here and stuff, and they're starting to get really well known. So
I was there, I think it was 2014. I actually won the Apple iTunes Award from Apple, and they sent me to London out of like 65,000 people. I was one of the winners, and because they had their music festival September 1st through the 30th, and they had a different concert every night from Pharrell, Maroon 5, Pablo Latuni, Tony Bennett.
yeah.
And then you were playing. I was trying to connect with you on Saturday night because you guys were playing. I couldn't find the club, and then my phone was kind of messed up, and the cabbie took me for a ride outside of town and dropped me off outside of London. So I was in the middle of nowhere at 11 o'clock at night, and so we were never able to connect. I was really, because I think it was a private party with Earth, Wind, and Fire. I think that's what was happening.
Yes. As a matter of fact, we put on the party, me and my business partner from here at that time.
Okay.
Yeah, we threw a party for them and had a live band and everything. And my partner was really good at getting endorsements and stuff. I wish you could have made it. That would have been pretty cool. I'm sorry.
It would have been fun. Well, there'll be some other things.
Absolutely.
Also right now, you mentioned doing gigs from $50 to whatever. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the way of the musician these days. I was talking to you. Are you offering? Do you have the ability to be able to do piano lessons and bass lessons, like for anybody listening, if they wanted to get a special bass or piano lesson, how do you do that?
Oh, I've done them quite a bit on on the internet, Skype or what have you.
Okay.
Now about 7 or 8 years. I mean, I've taught people in Singapore and Australia, and actually some right down the road in London. So I do give both keyboard, piano, and that includes classical,
Yeah.
and bass lessons online. So that's been, and especially right now, it's starting to grow.
Yeah.
Because we're all stuck in our homes.
So if somebody wanted to get in touch with you, you want to give their email, or what would be the best way for somebody to get in touch with you, Morris?
You know something? You can find me. I'll give you my email. It's
Okay.
Mo at watersign. So that's WATERSIGN media.com. So
Say it
it's
one more time.
Mo at watersignmedia.com.
All right, cool. And I'll make sure when I post this that I'll write that out. I'll put that on too.
Awesome.
Because I know that when this thing finally passes, hopefully we can get you a gig here in Las Vegas and maybe a master class. We've got like a school of the arts for high school here, kind of like that show Fame, like it was on Growing Up. We have something similar there, and I could talk to them about bringing you in for a master class and a concert or something like that over there. That would be cool.
Yeah.
Cool. So in closing here today, what you got any parting things or thoughts or ideas or anything you'd like to share?
Well, in general, just, I really am a believer in following your dreams, so I like to encourage young musicians to, believe in themselves and really, if something has been planted in you, for example, I used to dream about being in Earth, Wind and Fire when I was a kid, and if you're feeling that, don't let anybody tell you anything different, and just go for it and really bet on yourself, so that would be my last word, would just be like, follow your dreams, basically.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you very much for your time here today, Morris. Don't hang up because I still want to talk to you after this, but I want to thank you very much for your time here today, and we'll do this again, and maybe we'll meet up in Guildford for one of those fundraiser concerts out there. What do you think?
Yeah, brother, let's do that. Yeah, I've been dying.
All right.
Yeah,
That'd be great. So on that note, I'm going to say 2 claps, boom. You keep rocking, and I'll talk to you soon, my brother. Thank you for your time.
Okay, brother.
All right, hold on 1 second here.
I'm going to get